It's really great that so many of you nice people all over this wonderful world listen to my stories. Where are you from? What time is it there? And if you enjoy this story, please press the like button or give it a thumbs up. I would really be thankful if you could do that. It would help me a lot. This is a rewriting of a famous story. I hope you enjoy it. I was born in the year of 1632 in the city of York in the north of England. My father was German, and he came to live and work in England when he was a younger man. Soon after that, he married my mother, who was English. My father did well in his business, and I went to a good school. He wanted me to get a good job and live a quiet life, but I didn't want that. I wanted adventure and an exciting life. I wanted to be a sailor and go to sea. I told my mother and father, but they were unhappy about this. "Please don't go," my father said. "You won't be happy. You know, sailors have a difficult and dangerous life." And because I loved him, and he was unhappy, I tried to forget about the sea. But I couldn't forget. About a year later, I saw a friend in town. His father had a ship, and my friend said they are sailing to London tomorrow. "Why don't you come with us?" And so on September the 1st, 1651, we sailed for London. But a few days later, the sea was rough and dangerous. As the ship rolled from side to side, I got seasick and scared. I cried all night. I wanted to go home and never go to sea again. The next day, the wind dropped, and the sea was quiet and beautiful again. My friend laughed. "How do you feel now?" I complained it was a terrible storm. "Oh, that wasn't a storm," my friend answered. "Just a little wind. Forget it. Come and have a drink." After a few drinks with my friend, I felt better and forgot about the danger and decided not to go home. I didn't want my friends and family to laugh at me. Once we had arrived in London, I stayed for some time, but I still wanted to go to sea again. So finally, when the captain of a ship asked me to go with him to Guinea in Africa, I agreed, and so I went to sea for the second time. It was a good ship, and will be fine, I thought. All went well, but when we were near the Canary Islands, a Turkish pirate ship came after us. They were famous thieves at that time, and we put up a good fight, but when it finished, we and the ship were prisoners. The Turkish captain and his men took us to Morocco as they wanted to sell us as slaves in the markets. In the end, the Turkish captain decided to keep me as his own slave. This was a sudden and terrible change in my life. I was now a slave, and this Turkish captain was my master. Down the coast of Africa for 2 long years, I lived the life of a slave. I worked in the house and the garden. I thought about how to escape every day, but it was never possible. My master liked to go fishing in a little boat, and he always took me with him. He often brought a man called Merle with us, and a young boy also. One day my master told us some of his friends wanted to go fishing tomorrow, so get the boat ready. We put a lot of food and drink on the boat, and the next morning we waited for my master and his friends. But when my master arrived, he was alone. "His friends don't want to go fishing today," he said, "but you go with Merle and the boy, and catch some fish for our supper tonight." "Yes, master," I answered quietly, but inside I was excited. Perhaps now I can escape. My master went back to his friends, and we took the boat out to sea. And for a time we fished quietly. Then when I had the chance, I moved carefully behind Merle and pushed him into the water. "Swim," I cried. "Swim to the shore." My master liked to shoot seabirds, and so there was a gun on the boat. Quickly I took the gun as Merle was swimming back. I shouted to him, "Go back to the shore. You can swim there. It's not too far. I won't hurt you. But if you come near this boat, he'll shoot you through the head." Merle turned and swam back to the shore. I told the boy Zuri, "If you help me, I'll be a good friend to you." Zuri was happy to help. "I'll go with you," he said. I wanted to sail to the Canary Islands, but I was afraid to go too far from shore. It was only a small boat, and we sailed for many days. We had very little water, and it was a dangerous coast with many wild animals. We were afraid to go, but we often had to go on shore to get more water. Once I used the gun to shoot an animal. I don't really know what animal it was. I had never seen one of these before. But it made a good meal that night, and many more for about the next 10 or 12 days. We sailed south, down the coast of Africa. Then one day we saw some people on the shore. They were strange wild people who did not look friendly. By now we had very little food, and we really needed help. We were afraid, but we had to go on shore. They seemed just as afraid of us too. Maybe white people had never visited this area. We did not speak their language, of course, so we used our hands and expressions as best we could to show that we were hungry. They came with food for us, but then they moved away quickly. We carried the food to our boat, and they watched us eat. I wanted to thank them, but I had nothing to give them. Just then a big wild cat came down to the shore from the jungle. The tribe's people were afraid, and the women cried out. Quickly, I took my gun and shot one of the animals. I gave them the meat of the dead animal, and they gave us more food and water. We now had a lot of food and water, and so we sailed on for 11 more days. If you're enjoying this story, please press the like button or give it a thumbs up. I would really be thankful if you could do that. It would help me a lot. When we came near the Cape Verde Islands, we could see them, but we couldn't get near because there was no wind. But then Zuri saw a ship. We called and shouted and sailed our little boat as fast as we could, but the ship did not see us. Then I remembered the guns, which made a lot of smoke. I fired into the air. The ship saw us and turned. Once we were on the ship, the Portuguese captain listened to my story. He was going to Brazil and agreed to help me. He wanted nothing in return. He even gave me money for my little boat. We arrived in Brazil 3 weeks later. I said goodbye to the captain and Zuri, left Asip and went to begin a new life. I stayed in Brazil and worked hard for some years. By then I was richer than I ever thought I would be, but also bored. One day my friends came to me and said they're going to Africa to make some money, and why don't I come with them? We'll all be rich after this journey, I thought. How stupid I was. I had a comfortable life now, but of course, I agreed. And so, in 1659 I went to sea again. At first all went well, but then a terrible storm. The wind and the rain did not stop for over a week. We lost 3 men to the sea, and soon the ship was leaking. We are all going to die, I said to myself. Then one morning one of the sailors saw land, but just a moment later our ship hit a hidden reef below. The ship was stuck, and we were really in danger now. The sea was trying to break the ship into pieces, and we had very little time. Quickly we put a small lifeboat into the sea and got off the ship. But the sea was very rough, and our little boat could not handle the waves. Just 10 minutes later, the angry sea turned our boat over, and we were all thrown in the water. I looked for my friends, but I saw nobody. I was alone, and I could not see the land now. Only mountains of water all around me. But then suddenly I felt the ground under my feet. Another mountain of water came and pushed me up the beach, and I fell on the wet sand. I was just thankful to be alive. Slowly, I got to my feet and went higher up the beach. From there I looked out to sea. I could see our ship, but it was wrecked. All my friends were drowned. I was alive, but on a strange island with no food, no water, and no gun. It was getting dark now, and I was tired. I was afraid to sleep on the beach as there were wild animals. So I climbed up into a tree, and I stayed there all night. When day came, the sea was quiet again. I looked for our ship, and to my surprise, it was still there and still in one piece. I think I can swim to it, I said to myself. So I walked down to the sea. Before long, I was at the ship and was swimming round it. There was a lot of water in the ship, but the sand under the sea was still holding the ship in place. The back of the ship was high out of the water, and I was thankful for this because the ship's food was kept there. I was very hungry, so I began to eat something at once, and I decided to take some of it back to the shore. But how could I get it there? I looked around the ship, and after a few minutes I found some long pieces of wood. I tied them together with rope and collected the things that I wanted from the ship. There was a big box of rice, and salted meat, and bread. I also took some strong knives and other tools, the sails and ropes, books, and the gun. Carefully I went back to the shore. It was difficult to stop my things from falling into the sea, but in the end I got everything onto the shore. Now I needed somewhere to keep my things. There were some hills around me, so I decided to build myself a little house on one of them. I walked to the top of the highest hill and looked down. I was unhappy because I saw then that I was on an island. There were 2 smaller islands a few miles away, and after that only the sea. Just the sea, for mile after mile. I found a little cave in the side of a hill in front of it. A good place to make a home. So I used the ship's sails and rope and pieces of wood, and after a lot of hard work, I had a very fine tent. That night I went to sleep in my new home. The next day I thought about the possible dangers on the island. Wild animals and perhaps wild people too. I didn't know, so I decided to build a fence. I cut down young trees and put them in the ground in a half circle around the front of my cave. I used many of the ship's ropes, and in the end, my fence was as strong as a stone wall. Nobody could get over it, through it, or around it. I needed more tools to help me in future, so I decided to go back to the ship and get some more things. I went back 12 times in total, but soon after there was another terrible storm. The next morning when I looked up out to sea, there was no ship anymore. I knew that my island was somewhere off the coast of South America, and ships did not often come down this coast. I'm going to be on this island for a long time, I said to myself. So, on a piece of wood I cut these words, 30th of September, 1659. After that I decided to make a cut for each day I was here. I still needed a lot of things. I'm going to have to make them. I wanted to make my cave bigger, so I carried out stones from the cave and After many days' hard work, I had a large cave in the side of the hill. Now I needed a table and a chair, and so that was my next job. I had to work on them for a long time. I also wanted to make places to put all my food and all my supplies to keep them off the damp floor. But every time I wanted a piece of wood, I had to cut down a tree. It was long, slow, difficult work. But during the next few months, I learned to be very resourceful with my tools. There was no hurry. I had all the time in the world. I also went out every day, and I always had my gun with me. Sometimes I killed a wild animal, and so I had meat to eat. But when it got dark, I had to go to bed. Because I had no light, I couldn't read or write, or do much at all. But eventually, I learned how to use the fat of the animals I hunted to make a light. The weather on my island was usually very hot, and there were often storms and heavy rain. By next June, it rained heavily all the time. I couldn't go out very often, which was quite frustrating. I was also ill for some weeks, but slowly I got better. When I was stronger, I began to go out again. The first time I went out, I caught a big turtle. It was a huge relief, and kept me going for a while. I was on the island for 10 months before I visited the further parts of it. During those months, I worked hard on my cave and my house and my fence, and now I was ready to find out more about the rest of the island. First, I walked along the side of a little river. There I found open ground. Later, I came to a large group of trees, with many different, strange-looking fruits on them. I took a lot of the fruit and put it out to dry in the sun. Now I could keep it for many months. The next day, I went on with my journey. I came to an opening in the hills in front of me. Everything was green and there were flowers everywhere. There were also a lot of different birds and animals. I now knew that my cave was on the worst side of the island, but I didn't want to move from there. I stayed away for 3 days, and then I went back to my cave, but I often returned to the other greener side of the island. Once, there was a terrible storm with very heavy rain. The roof of my cave fell in and nearly killed me. I had to build it back up again with pieces of wood. Luckily, I had a lot of food now. I cooked it over a fire or dried it in the sun, so I always had meat during the rainy months when I could not go out with a gun. One day I found a little bag we used on the ship to keep the chicken food in. There was still some of the food in the bag, and so I dropped some of it onto the ground. About a month later, I saw something bright green there. It had started to grow, and after 6 months, I had a very small field of corn. I was very excited, as perhaps now I could make my own bread. It was easy to say, but not so easy to do. It is a lot of work to make bread from corn. Many people eat bread, but how many people can take corn from a field and make bread out of it? Without any help, I had to try to learn how, and it was a year before I cooked and ate my first bread. During all this time, I never stopped thinking about when I traveled across to the other side of the island. I could see the other islands, and I suddenly thought perhaps I can get there with a boat, or perhaps I can get back to England one day. So I decided to make myself a boat. I cut down a big tree and then began to carve it out. It was hard work, but about 6 months later I had a very fine canoe. Next, I had to get it down to the sea. But how stupid I was. Why didn't I think before I began work, as of course the canoe was too heavy. I couldn't move it. I pulled and pushed and tried everything, but it wouldn't move. On my 6th year, I did make myself another smaller canoe, but I did not try to escape in it. The boat was too small for a long journey, and I did not want to die at sea. The island was my home now, not my prison, and I was just happy to be alive. A year or 2 later, I made myself a second canoe on the other side of the island. I also built myself a second house there, and so I had 2 homes. Life was still busy from morning to night. There were always things to do or make. I learned to make new clothes for myself from the skins of dead animals. They looked very strange, but they kept me dry in the rain. I kept food and tools at both my houses and also wild goats. There were many goats on the island, and I made fields with high fences to keep them in. They learned to take food from me, and soon I had goat's milk to drink every day. I also worked hard in my cornfields, and many years went by. Then one year, something strange and terrible happened. I often walked along the shore, and one day I saw something in the sand. I went over to look at it more carefully, and to my surprise, it was a footprint. The footprint of a man. Who could this be? Afraid, I looked around me. I listened. I waited. I was more afraid, perhaps, that this man was one of those wild people who killed and ate other men. I looked everywhere, but there was nobody and no other footprints. I turned and ran home. There's someone on my island, I said to myself. Perhaps he knows about me. Perhaps he's watching for me. Perhaps he wants to kill me. That night I couldn't sleep and kept my gun ready. The next morning, I put more fencing around my house to make it more secure. Now, for the first time in years, alone on this island, I was afraid. I did not leave my cave for 3 days. But eventually I had to go out to milk the goats. But for 2 long years after seeing that footprint, I was cautious and stayed near my home. I never hunted with my gun anymore because I didn't want to make a noise. I just could not forget that footprint, but over time I saw and heard nothing more, and slowly I began to feel safer. A year later I was over on the west side of the island. From there I could see the other islands, and I could also see a small boat far out to sea. Perhaps that explains the footprint. Maybe. I hope it was just a visitor from one of the other islands. I began to move more freely around the island again, and I built myself a third house. It was in a very secret place, in a cave deep in the jungle. Sometime later something happened which I can never forget. I was on the west side of the island and was walking along the shore when I saw something awful. There were skulls on the beach and other bones of men everywhere. For a minute I couldn't think, and then I understood. Sometimes there were fights between the wild men on the other islands. Then they would come here to my island with their prisoners to kill and cook them. I went home carefully, but I was very angry. How could men do such a thing to one another? For many months I watched carefully for the smoke from fires, but I didn't see anything. Somehow the wild men came and went, and I never saw them. So one morning in my 23rd year on the island, I was out in my fields, and I saw the smoke from a fire. Quickly I went up the hill to watch. There were 9 men around the fire. They were cooking their terrible food. They danced around the fire, singing and shouting for about 2 hours. Then they got into their boats and sailed away. I went down to the shore. I saw the blood of the dead men on the sand. The next time they come, I'm going to kill them, I said to myself. From that day on, I never went anywhere without my gun, and I felt lonely and afraid. One night there was a very bad storm, and I thought I heard the sound of guns out at sea. The next morning I looked out and saw a ship. It had crashed onto the reef not far from the shore. Quickly I put my little boat in the water and sailed out to it. I took some clothes and tools, and also a box of Spanish gold and silver. I was a rich man now, but what use was money to me? I could not buy anything with it. What I really wanted was a friend, somebody to talk to, somebody who could help me escape from my island. So one morning I woke up and made a plan. You'll try to catch one of the prisoners of the wild men. He will be happy to be alive, and perhaps he could help me to escape this island. I watched day and night, but for a year and a half, there were no boats. Then, one day 5 boats came. They had 2 prisoners. They made their fire on the sand and danced around it. They killed one of the prisoners and began to cook their terrible meal. The second prisoner waited under the trees with 2 men to watch him. Suddenly the prisoner turned and ran. The 2 men ran after him. He ran like a wild goat, and soon I saw that he was coming near the bottom of my hill. As fast as I could, I ran down the hill. I jumped out of the trees between the prisoner and the 2 wild men. I hit the first man with the butt of my gun and he fell down, but I had to shoot the second man. The poor prisoner did not move. He was afraid of the noise of my gun. I spoke to him softly and tried to show him that I was friendly. I took the prisoner to my secret cave on the other side of the island. I gave him new clothes from the shipwreck, food and drink. He seemed happy to have been saved. After that he went to sleep. He was a fine young man, about 25 years old. Tall and well-built, with a kind face. I decided to give him the name Friday because I first saw him on a Friday. When he woke up in the morning, he ran out to me as I was milking my goats in the field. Later, we went back to my first house. We went carefully along the beach, but there were no boats and no wild men. Just blood and bones all over the sand. When we got to my house, I gave Friday some more salvaged clothes. He liked his new clothes very much. I then went to sleep, but for a few weeks I always took my gun to bed with me. Perhaps Friday was still a wild man and might try to kill me in my sleep. Friday was a quick learner and his English got better day by day. He helped me with the goats, with the work in the cornfields, and soon we were good friends. I enjoyed teaching him, and most of all having a friend to talk to. This was the happiest of all my years on the island. Friday and I lived together happily for 3 years. Then I told him the story of my adventures and about life in England. He told me about his country and his people. One day we were at the top of the highest hill on the island, and we were looking out to sea. It was a very clear day and we could see a long way. Suddenly Friday shouted with happiness. "What's the matter?" I asked. "I can see my island," he said excitedly. "Look over there." I looked, and there, to the northwest between the sea and the sky, was a long thin piece of land. I learned later that it was the island of Trinidad, and that my island was on the coast of South America. In the next few years we were running out of supplies. Our clothes had worn away and we had to use the wild animals of the island to make new clothes. They were comfortable to wear but not very good looking. I began to think again about escape. Perhaps Friday wanted to go home too. Perhaps together we could get to his country. I took Friday to the other side of the island and showed him my big canoe. It still lay under the trees. It was very old now and there were holes in the wood. "Could a boat like this sail to your country, Friday?" I asked him. "Oh, yes," he answered. "A boat like this can carry a lot of food and water." "Then we'll make another canoe like it and you can go home in it," I said. But Friday suddenly looked very unhappy. "Why are you angry with me?" he asked. "What have I done? Why do you want to send me home?" "I thought you wanted to go home," I said. "Yes, but you must come with me. Don't send me away from you." Then I saw that Friday was a true friend, and so I agreed to go with him. We began work on the canoe at once. Friday chose the tree himself. He understood wood better than I did, and we cut it down. We worked hard, and in a month, the boat was finished. 2 weeks later, it was in the sea, and we began to get ready for our long journey. We worked hard to get the corn in and to make a lot of bread. We had dried fruit and salted meat and big pots to keep water in. One evening, Friday went out to look for a turtle for meat and eggs. But in less than an hour, he was back, and he looked very afraid. He shouted, "There's a ship near the island, and men are coming to the shore in a boat." I jumped up and ran with him down to the shore. To my great surprise, I saw that it was an English ship. But why was it here? Ships never came this way. Perhaps they were pirates. "Don't let them see you, Friday," I said. "We'll hide in the trees and watch from there." 11 men were in the boat, but 3 of them were prisoners. Their arms were tied with rope, but their legs were free so they could walk. The other sailors pushed the 3 prisoners up the beach, laughing and shouting and hitting them. Some of them sat down on the sand and began to drink. Others walked away to look at the island, and 2 men stayed to watch the boat. The prisoners walked slowly along the beach and sat down under a tree not far from us. They looked very unhappy. Quietly, I came up behind them through the trees and called out to them. "Don't be afraid," I said. "I'm an Englishman. Perhaps I can help you." The 3 men turned and looked at me. They did not answer. They were too surprised. Perhaps they thought I was a wild man myself in my strange homemade clothes of animal skins and with my long hair and beard. Then the oldest man spoke. "I am the captain of that ship," he said, "and these 2 men are my first and second officers. Last night there was a mutiny and they took the ship from me. Now they're going to leave the 3 of us here to die on this island." "Do these mutineers have guns?" I asked. "Only 2, he answered. "And they've left those on the boat." "All right," I said. "We'll fight them. But if we get your ship back, you must take me back to England." The captain agreed immediately and thanked me very warmly for my help. Friday ran back to my house to get all the guns, and the captain and I made a plan. The first part was easy because the seamen were not ready for a fight. We shot the 2 men at the boat, and the captain shot another man, a man called Tom, who was the worst of them. Tom had began the mutiny on the ship. Then the captain talked to the other 5 men, and they agreed to help him. They did not really want to be mutineers, but they were afraid of Tom. Now I said to the captain, "We must get back your ship." "How many men are still on it?" 26, the captain replied, "and they will fight hard, because if they be caught, it is death for all mutineers in England. But not all the men are bad. I'm sure that some of them will help me." Just then we noticed another boat, which was coming from the ship to the beach. There were 10 men in it, and many had guns. We ran into the trees and waited to ambush them. It was a long, hard fight, but by now it was dark, and this helped us. We ran here and there in the trees, calling and shouting. The sailors could not see us, and did not know how many men we had. In the end, the captain shouted to them, "Put down your guns and stop fighting. I have 50 island people to help me. We can kill you all." So the seamen stopped fighting. We took their guns. 3 of the men agreed to come back to the captain, and we put the others in my cave. Friday and I stayed to watch the prisoners, while the captain and his men went back to fight for their ship. All night we listened to the sound of guns and shouting, but in the morning when the sun came up, the captain was master of his ship again. I went down to the shore to meet him. "My dear friend," he cried, "there's our ship. It's ours again." How happy I was to leave the island. It had been so long, and my good friend Friday came with me, of course. We left the mutineers on the island. They could begin a new life there, just as I had before. So in December 1686, after 27 years, I finally said goodbye to my island. When I got back to England, I felt like a stranger in the country. Things were different now, and few people remembered me. I headed home to York, but after all these years, my father and mother were dead. Even my brother had passed. I did find the 2 sons of my brother. They were happy to learn that I was alive, and I was pleased to find some family. After a few months, I decided to go down to Portugal. I had friends there who could help me to sell my old land in Brazil as I needed money. I found the Portuguese captain who took me in a ship to Brazil all those years ago. It was good to see him again, and he helped me with my business. And soon, I was ready to go home again. Once back in England, I bought a house and began to live a quiet life. And my 2 nephews came to live with me. One of them even wanted to be a sailor just like I had been all those years ago. In the next few years, I got married, and we had 2 children. But sadly, my wife got sick and died, and I was lonely. But then my nephew, who was now the captain of the ship, came home to see me. He knew that I did not really like this quiet life. "I have a fine ship, Uncle," he said. "I'm sailing out to India and the Philippines. Why don't you come with me?" I didn't have to think about it for very long. "Yes," I said. And so, a wonderful new exotic adventure began. If you enjoyed this story, please press the like button or give it a thumbs up. I would really be thankful if you could do that. It would help me a lot.
If you've enjoyed this journey, please give it a like and subscribe for more gentle stories to help you unwind. Sleep well.